Already, as the notions weaken, one is less affected by happiness and unhappiness, and knowledge of the unreality of the objects prevents attachment. So everything's a notion. All objects are notional. The body's a notion. The self is a notion. An external world is a notion, and so on. And if this is a mirage that we live within, and once the nature of the mirage becomes apparent, then we don't get caught up in it so much. And this is called non-attachment. When there is no hope, there is neither elation nor depression. And we're not talking about a state of hopelessness here. We're talking about the hope that we might get something from the world. The hope is that we're focusing on the world in the hope of getting something which is going to provide meaningful fulfillment. And when we give up that, we're no longer subject to elation or depression, or that, let's just say there's an increasing possibility of that. The mind itself is the jiva when it is reflected in consciousness. It's when consciousness starts thinking about itself, then we've got the mind and the arising of notions, and one of these notions being the jiva, or the individualized consciousness. And mind itself builds castles in the air, stretching itself, as it were, into the past, the present and the future. We start building notions about the past, present and future. It is not possible to comprehend the ripples of ideation, but this much can be said: sense experiences multiply them, and when these are given up, they cease to be. If these notions are real, like the blackness of coal, then you cannot remove them. But that is not so, hence they can be destroyed. I don't really think it's helpful to talk about destroying notions. What you can do is, I suppose you can destroy the power of the notions, but what you can do is disengage from them, and in disengaging from them, you destroy their seductive power. So ideation is fed by sense experiences. Again, this is notions of sense experiences. There's all that's going on is a stream of experiencing, and we categorize that into visual experiences, sound experiences, tactile experiences, and so on, and that fuels the whole process. Vasishta continued. Hearing the sage's words, I descended upon that kadamba tree. For a considerable time the three of us discussed self-knowledge, and I awakened in them the supreme knowledge. Then I took leave of them and went away. O Ram, this is meant to illustrate the nature of the world appearance, and therefore this story is as true as the world itself. It's all stories. Stories, science gives us stories, religion gives us stories, art gives us stories, everyday life gives us stories, our family background gives us stories, our cultural background gives us stories. It's all stories. Even if you believe that the world and yourself are real, then be it so. Rest firmly in your own self. If you think that this is both real and unreal, then adopt the appropriate attitude to this changing world. If you believe that the world is unreal, then be firmly established in the infinite consciousness. Similarly, when you believe that the world has had a creator or not, let it not cloud your understanding. What's this paragraph about then? It seems to be going through the various possibilities. You could believe that the world and yourself are real, or you could believe it's a mixture of the real and the unreal, or you could believe that it's unreal. But this paragraph, I think it's like one of those rocks that if you chip away at it, it reveals a beautiful crystalline structure. it seems to be, on the face of it, like a straightforward categorization or description. But I think it's actually a process here. You begin, first of all, by believing that this world and yourself are real. And if that's the case, then you can, it says, rest firmly in your own self. Well, you need to look for yourself, you need to examine the self. And that takes you on. And it makes you realise that there's, that's like discovering the attention. When the attention rests in itself, you've discovered pure awareness. And then you start flipping between this pure awareness and the world. You've still got to get on with things, and you adopt appropriate attitude to this changing world. And that will be getting involved in things or not getting involved in things, but realizing the unreal aspects of it and then disengaging from these unreal aspects. And then finally, if you believe that the world is unreal, which is a combination of this, then be firmly established in the infinite consciousness, which is simply consciousness. And then finally it says, similarly, whether you believe that the world has had a creator or not, let it not cloud your understanding. You might start thinking about things like, where does all this come from then? Where does the field of experiencing come from? And you might start thinking in terms of a creator or not. But don't let such notions cloud your understanding. I think most of us at some time are asked if we believe in God or not. I was actually asked this recently. And it was actually an atheist that was asking me. And I don't identify. The three categories are normally you're either a believer, or you're an atheist, which is a non-believer, or you're agnostic. And I disputed all three categories because I have no intention of defining myself in relation to notions of God, which is what an atheist does. An atheist is somebody who obviously thinks that God is so important that he or she has got to define themselves in relation to God, or to believing in God. And I think we can step away from that whole spectrum, that whole continuum of belief or non-belief. It's all, we don't need to be defined by it, we don't need to be caught up in it. It's not relevant to our being. Being a believer or being a non-believer is a total irrelevance. They are all notions, all concepts, they are all beliefs, and we can just step aside from it. We don't need to worry about our position in relationship to God, because God is no more than a notion. How can God be anything else? It's something that we've got in our head, a thought that we've got in our head. Everything that we've got in our head or in our mind is a notion. And I'm sure some people will be quite offended that I'm saying God is only a notion. But that's because you've got a huge investment in that notion. What else can God be but a notion? It's something that comes out of your head. And personally, I have no interest in that notion. And I have no interest in denying the notion of God either. Being an atheist is also a notion. So that's what it means. Don't let it cloud your understanding whether you believe that the world has had a creator or not. It doesn't really matter, because whether you believe it or you don't believe it, taking a standpoint will cloud your understanding. So we don't take these beliefs too seriously. We don't take non-beliefs too seriously either, because they're all of the same nature.